Hello and welcome to the Clever channel. I'm Jason, your host. I had an interesting discussion last night. Well, this morning because I couldn't get to sleep. It just started with very simple. I was talking to ChatGPT and I'm just having a little conversation about things. I asked it about my first question was, how many nuclear missiles did the USSR have before its downfall? And it came out as being basically the USSR had about 40,000 nuclear warheads by the time the USSR ended. Some of these were for air-launched missiles and bombers, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SLBMs, and intercontinental ballistic missiles. Yay! So that's how they had. You don't need that amount of missiles. It fluctuated a lot because we had SALT 1 and 2 in the 70s and the 90s, which was SALT 1 and SALT 2 were strategic arms limitation talks. And START 1 was the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, 1991. So a lot of the old stuff was gotten rid of in some way or other. But when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the responsibility for vast arsenal was mostly down to Russia, although you did have someone in Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, but they denuclearized themselves. But that's like 40,000 and about 10,000 delivery vehicles. At the top, that's compensating for something. I mean, seriously, you do not need anywhere near that amount to mess up the world. And then I thought to it, I said, okay, given the current state of the Russian military, because the stuff I've been researching myself about all this, given the current state of the Russian military and its levels of almost complete corruption, there's a very good chance that since the end of the Cold War, no maintenance of nuclear warheads or launch ICBMs was taken, and even the silo launch doors were never tested. What would be the realistic state of all those warheads? I wanted to get ChatGPT's take on this. So, your question was, the nuclear warhead reliability and maintenance, warhead degradation, tritium, and that if it isn't replaced, very fine electronics, material aging, all these kind of things. It's just pointing out all the things that I had talked about in my thing, basically, just in a very eloquent way. Nuclear materials, especially plutonium, have aging properties that can affect the efficiency of the devices. Detonators and other sophisticated electronics can degrade over time. So you've got all that done. You've got all this kind of. Then we're talking about the actual silos. Now, the silo maintenance mostly depends on, from what it's saying, hydraulic pumps and that. Like to open the blast doors, to be able to launch the missiles, to release the clamps on the thingy. Now, if they aren't checked, if they aren't maintained, if the hydraulic fluid isn't thingy, it ain't going to work. The amount that is probably just stuck is crazy. Then the command and control issues maintaining reliable. Yeah, because of all the corruption, everything. Mobile ICBMs as well. Submarine launch missiles. Aging submarines. Russia maintains a fleet of nuclear ballistic missile submarines, which serve as a critical part of its second strike capability. They're very costly to maintain and require periodic overhauls to remain at sea. They're not getting that. They're not getting that at all. Yeah. I mean, so the launches on those, the bombers and air launch systems for the bombers for the nuclear, all this effects of corruption. Okay. Rampant corruption is an endemic problem within the Russian military. Funds intended for maintenance, upgrades, and procurement are often diverted, leaving less for essential tasks. Supply chains for critical spare parts can be disrupted or underfunded, and the quality of work is often compromised, meaning that maintenance is either delayed or done poorly. There have been documented cases where non-functional or degraded equipment was reported as fully functional simply to keep up appearances. And so on. So it believes, like I do, that most of the Russian nuclear missiles that are non-functional. It's more a psychological deterrent than an actual deterrent. So then we went on to other things. So I did a follow-on question and said, due to the above situation and the corruption and all that kind of thing, my question was, due to the above situation and the complete lack of real-world data that was presented to Putin before he decided to invade Ukraine, how likely is it that Vladimir Putin knows the truth about his nuclear readiness and capabilities? And so, yeah, the ChatGPT then talks about the authoritarian leadership and the yes man culture, hierarchy of fear, where everybody lies about where if things go wrong, you don't tell the boss because you die. You don't bring a problem, you just say, oh yeah, it's all working, and you just continue along that path. They tell him what they believe he wants to hear, not the truth, for self-preservation. And this is the way it's been. Corruption and lack of accountability, systemic inefficiencies in Russian intelligence gathering, including the FSB and GRU. The amount they dropped the ball in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and thinking that they'd take the place in like a few days. It was absolutely fucking crazy. Putin's isolation and limited access to unbiased information. So, and he relies on loyalists, which are yes men. So, yeah. So the conclusion is down to all this. Conclusion: how likely is Putin to know the truth about his military readiness, his nuclear readiness? Given all these factors, it seems quite likely that Vladimir Putin does not fully know the truth about Russia's nuclear readiness and capabilities. The authoritarian structure of its leadership, combined with a lack of transparency, systemic corruption, and a military culture that rewards presenting only good news, makes it very difficult for accurate information to reach him. In addition, the problems Russia has experienced in Ukraine, largely stemming from misinformation, unrealistic planning, and a failure to properly assess real capabilities, are reflective of a broader issues that likely extend to nuclear readiness as well. Just as he was apparently led to believe that an easy victory in Ukraine, Putin may well have been misled, either intentionally or as a result of systemic weaknesses, into believing that Russia's nuclear deterrent is in better shape than it is. So yeah, that's an... Now we talked about... See, this is the wonderful thing about ChatGPT. That's my follow-on question to this, because I had quite a bit of time during the night to talk with ChatGPT. So my follow-on question was this. Thank you. Now, in my opinion, Putin's invasion of Ukraine is one of the biggest blunders in recent military history, even going back to Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. Putin was in a very good position before the war. He had most of Europe and the UK eating out of his hands for fuel and goods. NATO was about to be defunded. We were all in one big happy family. In the UK, we even removed some of our gas storage because dependable Russia was giving us all we needed. Yes, we had a massive miscalculation on European side, but Putin and Russia could have gone from strength to strength. Which reply to this, I absolutely understand your perspective, and it reflects a view shared by many analysts who see the invasion of Ukraine as a colossal strategic blunder, perhaps even one of the greatest miscalculations in recent history. You make some compelling points. Putin was indeed in an incredibly advantageous position before 2022, when he held a significant leverage over much of Europe through energy dominance and geopolitical influence. Let's break down why his decision to invade Ukraine seems so counterproductive and how it compares to other infamous blunders in history. Pre-war position, strategic leveraging and economic power. Before the invasion, Russia held considerable soft power in Europe, largely driven by its energy dominance. Energy dependence, Russia was the main supplier of natural gas to Europe, providing 40% of Europe's gas needs. This dependency gave Putin immense leverage over European nations, who, as you note, made several policy decisions that increased their reliance on Russian fuel. The UK, Germany, and many other countries reduced their strategic energy reserves, and in Germany's case, even shut down nuclear reactors in favour of cheap, reliable Russian gas. Economic interdependence. Russia's energy exports was generating vast revenues, which Putin was key to both to the domestic economy and to stabilise his regime. Russia's oil and gas exports were a key pillar, and influence over European politics. Putin had established relationships with influential political and business figures across Europe. He was in a win-win position. Before the attack on Ukraine, he had so much going for him. And it's like the ultimate facepalm. The ultimate facepalm that shouldn't have happened. And NATO was in a weakening state before this, and gradual decline because we didn't think we needed NATO. Yeah, and then we go into part two of its summarization: the invasion, a colossal strategic miscalculation. Yeah, underestimating Ukraine's resistance, overestimating Russia's military capabilities, igniting a NATO revival, losing European energy leverages. I mean, seriously. And basically it's turned into a geopolitical isolation. I mean, it might still have contact with China and Iran and that, but it's lost so much. The brain drain, the amount of Russian skilled ex-workers that left the country when the war started. So this is a long-term problem, and limited global influence now. Doesn't get invited to any of the parties. Its military weakness exposed. If you look back before 2022, there was lots of YouTube videos saying the top 10 armies in the world, and Russia was always up there. Everybody believed that. I mean, you know the saying they have where it's better to say nothing in a room full of people than to say something and prove your stupidity. As long as Russia didn't attack anyone and didn't show how bad its thing is, people would have still classed them as being in that state. And the consequences of the invasion is it strengthened the bonds between Europe and all of NATO, and it's very comparable to the Pearl Harbor and that kind of thing. Conclusion. Putin's invasion of Ukraine seems in hindsight to be a self-inflicted wound that turned a strong strategic position into a rapidly declining one. by pushing Europe away and failing to anticipate the international response. Putin transformed a stable, favourable geopolitical environment into a nightmare scenario for Russia, which includes a revitalised NATO, stronger than ever, than it's ever been, an economically independent Europe, no longer reliant on Russian energy, a militarily weakened Russia, exposed in its inability, and growing international isolation. They did it to himself. Well, he fucking did it. No. And as I just commented at the bottom, that Russia's armed forces is now the subject of massive amounts of memes and jokes. They're like the butt of so many jokes the Russian army has now. It's like the things that have come out since then. They did it to themselves. Well, he did it. He made the decision of doing something like that. So yeah. So then I asked the question of ChatGPT, going by Putin's actions and how he is becoming more and more backed into a corner. After all, if he loses this or doesn't find a way to save face, he will end up having one of those accidents that seem to be so popular in Moscow. How likely do you think it is that he will end up using nukes, even knowing will end him and his country? And even though he's all the stuff that's gone down in there, he is still a rational actor model, what they call a rational. Even with all the rhetoric and the shouting and the stupidity, he's still an intelligent, rational actor. He's up against the wall, but he's in this situation where he'll wave his fist in that, but he knows it would fucking end him completely. A nuclear war. Not just him, his entire country would be gone from the face of the earth, no matter how many missiles he managed to launch. There was no win. And China wouldn't back them. China's always said, you use nukes, that's it. You're not having our help ever again, even if it's tactical. So there's internal and external pressure. Nobody wants the nuke fight. So that's why it's not as bad as it looks. So now at this point in time, I pivot the conversation away from that and say, and now for another big one. Am I right in thinking the biggest nuclear threat is not from Russia, but Iran? And because of things I've talked about in my videos before. And yeah, and it all comes down this ideological differences and the concept of martyrdom. Religious ideology, unlike Russia, which relies on the rational actor model, aiming to preserve its influence, power, and territorial integrity, Iran's leadership is guided by a complex mix of religious ideology, political ambitions, and regional influence. The notion that a nuclear weapon could be a holy fire to cleanse the region of perceived Western and Israeli influence is rooted in some of the rhetoric expressed by the more hardline factions within Iran. These factions see Israel as an illegitimate state, often referring to it as a cancer in the region that must be eradicated. This view, combined with the ideological concept of martyrdom, the idea that sacrificing oneself for the cause of Islam is an honour, could potentially lead to a very different calculus on how nuclear weapons might be used. Martyrdom and escalation for Iran and nuclear strike could indeed be seen as a form of martyrdom, particularly if hardline factions that see itself fulfilling a divine mission takes control of decision making. Unlike other nuclear powers who use their weapons for deterrent or geopolitical bargaining, Iraq's leadership, especially within the Revolutionary Guard Corps, might view nuclear weapons as a tool for a religious and existential battle rather than instruments for measured deterrence. The concept of martyrdom means that they may not be deterred by the prospect of massive retaliation in the same way Russia or other countries would be, like we were talking about it earlier. This idea that nearly every sane or even semi-sane leader of the world will use their nuclear weapons as a big stick to say, look, don't attack us, we can do this. But Iran's... So we go into further detail of this here. See, this is part of it. I look through all the news sites, I talk to AI, I read what's going on Reddit and what the different posts and different political forums and all those kind of things to come up. When I say I think that Russia's thingy and the biggest threat is thingy, you're now seeing some of the data that I base this on. So, Iran's geopolitical calculus and political network. Wow, that's a big set of words. Regional influence. Iran has expanded its influence in the Middle East through its support of proxies such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthi rebels in Yemen, and various militias in Iraq and Syria. This approach provides Iran with asymmetrical capabilities. It doesn't need to be in a direct confrontation to inflict damage. With nuclear capabilities, Iran could embolden these proxies to act more aggressively, knowing that their actions are backed by the implicit threat of a nuclear-armed Iran. Now, Israel has something called the Samson option. Israel is believed to have a second strike capability through its own nuclear arsenal, which is aimed at deterring existential threats. Often seen as the Samson option, this doctrine is named after biblical figure Samson, who destroyed himself along with his enemies when facing no other option. Iran's leadership may not believe that Israel or even the United States would go through with retaliation, nuclear retaliation, because of the collateral damage in the Middle East, all the oil fields and everything, especially considering the proximity of what's going on there. This kind of belief held by Iranian leaders could lead to dangerous miscalculation. Basically, what it's putting in lots of words is basically the idea that if Iran thinks that it can get away with nuking and that no one will nuke them back because of the collateral damage to the area, that's a very dangerous thing. Then that frees them of the deterrence idea. See, mutual assured destruction was actually pretty damn stable. Weird but stable. It works for so many years. But if you get someone, it only works. So, mutually assured destruction works because both sides have an interest in avoiding their own annihilation. The threat of nuclear retaliation was sufficient to stop all the countries in the world that have got nukes from killing each other. That's how it works. It's crazy, but it works. But if you have a non-deterrable mindset, if a nuclear-armed Iran leadership sincerely believes that an attack leading to its own destruction is justified under religious or ideological framework, then MAD does not apply. If their perspectives involve seeking martyrdom, and if the leadership sees the ultimate confrontation with Israel as a divine mission, it suggests that Iran could have motivations that differ fundamentally from those of traditional nuclear armed state, which is why we've been trying for years and years to stop Iran getting nuclear missiles. So, the risk of nuclear terrorism. What if they put together a nuclear warhead and then give it to one of our proxies? You don't need an ICBM to roll a truck into Israel with a nuclear warhead on board. That's scary. Imagine if, Hezbollah, they could create a dirty weapon that would totally fuck up Israel and no one could live there forever. Well, for many, many years. Okay, so it's answering the question now, and all of this is actually the stuff that I researched myself. It just does it better than me. It does it a lot better. So it's like, so this is the crux of the matter. The difference. Russian context. While Russia's threat of nuclear use is concerning, especially when Putin feels backed into a corner, it is largely tied to political bargaining. He's just trying to say, look, I've got these, give me this. He wants to maintain a global influence and its own survival, self-preservation. So the chance of them actually using nukes, Russia using nukes, it'd have to be something really, really stupid. Let's put that in context there. Really, really stupid, like invading Ukraine. But but Iran's theocratic leadership. Iran's leadership operates within the framework of I'm going to butcher that, Shia Islam, where martyrdom plays a powerful role, and there is a strong ideological opposition to Israel and Western influence. The leadership, particularly the supreme leader and revolutionary guard, often frame their struggle against Israel and the West in religious terms, potentially viewing the use of nuclear weapons as a divine obligation rather than a deterrent. This mindset could theoretically increase the likelihood of nuclear use, particularly if there is a belief this action would fulfill a great religious mission, even if it results in self-destruction. And this is the worst part of it. The apocalyptical factionalism. Wow, that's a fun set of words. Some members of the Iranian leadership, such as elements aligned with the, I'm not going to try to, Dahavadite movement, those who believe in the imminent return of the Mahdi, a messianic figure in Shia Islam, may hold apocalyptic beliefs. This factionalism within Iran's power structure could mean that certain groups might push for nuclear action under circumstances that most other nuclear powers would consider irrational. So, this is why I love AI, especially AI like ChatGPT-4 and that, with the higher level learning and that, and the resource abilities to grab stuff. Because usually a lot of the stuff that I find out online, a lot of the stuff that I dig into, I can't put it into words. When I research a subject like this myself, and I do a video for all of you saying, hey, this is a problem, this is happening, and that, I can't give you my sources or anything because I've basically spent 10, 20, 30 hours just staring at a screen, looking at all the stuff and hyper-focusing and trawling the data. Asking me to do the documentation for you to show you why I've come to this conclusion. This is why sometimes it's nice to bring ChatGPT into it. This is only about half of the conversation I had during the night. We then went on to AI and all that kind of stuff. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute because this is already fucking too. But I just want to tell you why I believe and why the research holds out that Russia isn't the greatest threat when it comes to nuclear Armageddon. At this very moment, not even North Korea. It's Iran. if they build their stuff, basically the last little bit is a scary bit. I asked the question, based on current knowledge, how close is Iran to building its first nuclear weapon? And here's the good news, guys. Here's the good news. As of November 2024, it's in right now, Iran has made significant advances in its nuclear program, bringing it close to the capability to produce nuclear weapons. Key developments include uranium enrichment. I remember the massive amount of sabotage, the massive amount of sanctions to try and stop them. They still managed to do it. It took them a long time, but they've managed to. Iran has accumulated over 164 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity, approaching the 90% enrichment level required for weapons-grade material. International concerns. The International Atomic Energy Agency has expressed concerns over Iran's increases stockpile of near weapons-grade uranium and its lack of full cooperation with inspections. Potential weaponization timeline. Here's the bad news. Estimates suggest that Iran could produce enough weapons-grade uranium for a nuclear device within approximately 1 week, given its current stockpiles and advanced centrifuges. Bugger. I think that's what we say at this point. Bugger. It's sorry, not good news. Anyway, going to leave that there. Sorry, we went down a tube down. This is what happens when my brain explores these things, but no, that is verified that. Fuck. Bye bye for now.